The grand concert hall was alive with the soft rustle of programs and quiet chatter. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the polished wooden floors and the rows of plush seats. The audience had come to hear one of the finest pianists of the age, someone whose name alone could draw crowds from far and wide. Every eye in the hall was fixed on the stage, where the piano gleamed under the spotlight, waiting for the first note to fill the air. Among the crowd, there was a figure that many might have overlooked. He moved quietly along the edges of the hall, pushing a mop cart with worn wheels that squeaked softly against the wooden floor. He wore a simple uniform, slightly faded from years of washing floors and dusting seats, and carried himself with a quiet dignity. This was the janitor, someone who knew every corner of the hall, every crack in the floorboards, and every note of the music that floated through its walls. He had seen countless performances, often from the shadows, never daring to imagine that anyone might notice him for anything other than his work. Today was different. There was a rare energy in the hall, a tension that went beyond the usual excitement for the evening's performance. The janitor paused for a moment near the grand piano, watching the pianist practice. Her fingers moved with speed and grace, each note perfectly placed, her eyes focused, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. She was the picture of confidence, the very image of talent and success. She was someone who had spent her life mastering her craft, and it showed in every movement, every sound that escaped from the piano. The janitor had always loved music. Long ago, he had trained his fingers to dance across piano keys, learning melodies that now only lived in his memory. Life had taken him away from the stage, and circumstances had forced him into work that was far from the spotlight. But the music had never left him. He carried it quietly in his mind, in the movements of his hands as he cleaned the hall, in the pauses between sweeping and dusting. Today, something stirred inside him, a quiet voice telling him that maybe, just this once, he could share that music again. He moved closer to the piano, his hands brushing over the polished surface as if greeting an old friend. The pianist looked up, her brow furrowed slightly at the interruption. She was used to rehearsals being private, focused, and uninterrupted. Yet there was something about the janitor's presence that felt almost uninvited, like a shadow stepping into the light. The janitor cleared his throat softly and said, "I could play a piece if you'd like." For a moment, the hall seemed to hold its breath. The pianist blinked, taken aback by the suggestion. Her lips curved into a slight, incredulous smile, and then she laughed, a sound that was light but edged with amusement. "You?" she said, her tone both surprised and slightly mocking. "Play? I don't think so." The janitor did not respond with anger or embarrassment. He simply nodded, acknowledging her words without resistance. There was a calmness in him, a quiet acceptance that did not demand approval or recognition. He understood the ridicule, but he also knew that it mattered little. The music lived within him, and he was not afraid to let it out, no matter what others thought. People nearby had begun to notice the exchange. Some whispered among themselves, curious at the unexpected interaction. Some smiled politely, unsure of how to react. The contrast between the polished, celebrated pianist and the humble janitor was stark, almost theatrical in its simplicity. Here was talent wrapped in fame and confidence, and there was quiet skill hidden beneath years of work and modesty. The pianist returned to her practice, but her fingers stumbled slightly, a subtle falter born from distraction. She was not accustomed to being challenged, even in the smallest way, and the presence of someone daring to suggest that he could perform in the same space where she reigned supreme was disorienting. The janitor, on the other hand, stepped back, giving her space, moving his mop gently to the side, but his eyes remained on the piano, his mind turning over the pieces he could play, the melodies he could bring to life. The audience and staff in the hall began to take notice more openly. Some were intrigued, others skeptical. How could someone who spent his days cleaning floors possibly produce anything more than a few simple notes? And yet, there was a sense of anticipation, a tension that grew with every quiet movement, every silent pause. The janitor's offer had been dismissed, laughed at, yet it had planted a seed of curiosity. People could feel that something unusual was about to happen, even if they did not yet understand what it might be. As the pianist continued her warm-up, her music filling the air with familiar brilliance, the janitor quietly approached the piano bench. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, feeling their texture and weight, remembering the touch of the instrument from long ago. His hands were steady, his breathing calm. He was not seeking recognition, applause, or revenge for the mockery. He simply wanted to play, to let the music speak for itself. The pianist noticed the subtle movements, the careful way his fingers hovered above the keys. Her laughter had faded, replaced by a growing curiosity and perhaps a hint of unease. She had seen many musicians come and go, but she had never encountered someone like this. A person who had lived in the shadows yet seemed to carry an unseen depth of talent. The hall seemed to hold its breath again. The chandeliers glimmered softly, casting long reflections across the floor. The audience, still unaware of the janitor's potential, shifted in their seats, sensing that something remarkable might unfold. The stage, usually a place of predictable performance, now held the promise of surprise, the thrill of discovery. The janitor took a deep breath and began to play, not loud, not flashy, but with a precision and warmth that immediately captured attention. The notes flowed effortlessly, each one deliberate and full of emotion. The music was familiar yet uniquely his, a story told through the keys, a life expressed in melody. The pianist paused, her hands hovering above her own instrument, captivated despite herself. She had expected an awkward attempt, perhaps a few wrong notes, yet this was something entirely different. The first few bars filled the hall with a quiet magic, and slowly, the audience began to notice. Whispers faded, eyes widened, and even the staff stopped their routine tasks to listen. The janitor's playing was not just competent. It was extraordinary, moving, and undeniable. It spoke of years of practice, hidden skill, and a deep love for music that had not been extinguished by circumstance or time. For a moment, the grand concert hall seemed to shrink, as if the space itself had drawn in its breath, waiting for the next note. The contrast between the polished, famous pianist and the quiet janitor had shifted. It was no longer about reputation or appearances. It was about talent, about passion, about the power of music to transcend expectations. The pianist's earlier amusement was gone. She watched, fascinated and humbled, as the janitor played with a grace and intensity that rivaled any professional. She could see the emotion in his movements, the careful way he shaped each note, the subtle variations that brought the music to life. Her own preparation seemed distant now, a reminder that mastery was not only about skill but also about heart. And as the first part of this unexpected performance continued, it became clear that this was more than just a moment of surprise or curiosity. It was a lesson, a reminder that talent could be found in the most unlikely places, and that respect and recognition were not always tied to status or title. The janitor had stepped forward quietly, with no fanfare, and in doing so, he had captured the attention and admiration of everyone in the hall. By the time he finished the piece, the hall remained silent for a heartbeat, stunned by the beauty of what they had just witnessed. The notes lingered in the air, echoing softly, carrying with them the weight of unexpected brilliance. The pianist, once amused, now regarded him with a newfound respect, understanding that the world often underestimated those who lived outside the spotlight. The janitor stepped back, a quiet smile on his face, not seeking praise but feeling the satisfaction of sharing his music. The audience, still absorbing what they had heard, began to applaud, slowly at first, then with growing intensity. Whispers of amazement spread like wildfire, and the hall seemed to shimmer with the energy of surprise and wonder. In that moment, the grand concert hall was no longer just a place for famous performances. It had become a stage for truth, for recognition of hidden talent, and for the humbling reminder that brilliance could appear where it was least expected. And the janitor, once overlooked and dismissed, had quietly changed the way everyone in that hall would see the world of music, and perhaps the world itself. The applause from the first piece still lingered in the air, a mixture of surprise and admiration that filled the grand hall. The janitor stepped back from the piano, letting the applause wash over him with quiet humility. He did not smile broadly or bow dramatically. Instead, he simply nodded his thanks, a gesture that was understated but genuine. The audience was intrigued now, their curiosity growing with each passing moment. They had not come expecting this, yet they could sense that something extraordinary was unfolding before their eyes. The pianist, who had been preparing for her own performance, took a moment to collect herself. Her earlier amusement had disappeared, replaced by something more complex. She watched the janitor with careful eyes, trying to understand the depth of skill and emotion in his playing. There was no showmanship, no attempt to impress anyone. It was pure, heartfelt music, and it had silenced the entire hall in a way that only true talent could. The janitor returned to his cleaning duties, moving quietly around the hall, but the audience could not take their eyes off him. Every movement seemed thoughtful, deliberate, almost as if he carried the weight of his past within each gesture. He pushed his mop with care, his hands steady, his mind somewhere else entirely. Perhaps he was replaying the notes in his head, or perhaps he was simply savoring the rare recognition he had received. Either way, there was a calm dignity in him that contrasted sharply with the usual chaos of the bustling concert hall. Word of his performance had begun to spread quietly. Some of the staff exchanged whispered comments, amazed that someone who had worked behind the scenes could possess such incredible talent. Musicians who were in the wings, preparing for their own pieces, paused to look, their curiosity piqued. It was as though the very walls of the hall had taken note, carrying the echoes of his music through the empty corners and shadowed passages. The janitor's story was more than a tale of talent. It was a story of perseverance and quiet resilience. He had grown up in a modest home, where music was both a source of joy and a luxury that could not always be afforded. Early in life, he had learned to play by ear, teaching himself melodies and practicing whenever he could. His passion had been evident to anyone who listened, yet circumstances had led him down a different path. Life had required him to work, to support himself in ways that left little time for performing on grand stages. But the music never left him. It lived in his fingers, in the way he moved, in the subtle rhythm of his breathing. The pianist approached him cautiously, her expression a mix of curiosity and respect. She had seen many people in her career, talented and ambitious, but she had never encountered someone who could inspire awe without seeking it. She spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "You played beautifully. How long has it been since you performed in front of an audience?" The janitor looked at her with quiet eyes, reflecting a lifetime of experience and emotion. "A long time," he admitted, his voice calm and steady. "Life had other plans, but the music has always been with me." There was a pause as they both regarded each other. The pianist's initial condescension had faded completely. What remained was a deep, unspoken understanding of the dedication and love for music that transcended fame and position. The hall itself seemed to acknowledge this moment, holding its breath as if the walls were witnesses to a rare connection. Meanwhile, the audience could hardly contain their curiosity. Some moved closer, others leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear more. The janitor's performance had stirred something within them, a reminder that talent could be found in the most unexpected places. Conversations that had begun as whispers of disbelief now shifted to admiration and wonder. People were talking about the music, the emotion, the quiet power of a life lived with dedication and passion. The janitor, sensing the growing attention, did not hesitate. He moved back to the piano with a calm determination, choosing his next piece carefully. This time, he selected a melody that was more complex, one that required not just technical skill but emotional depth. As his fingers touched the keys, a hush fell over the hall. Every person in the audience felt the anticipation, sensing that this was not just a performance but a revelation. The notes began to flow, rich and full, weaving a story that went beyond music. Each chord carried a memory, a joy, a sorrow, a triumph. The hall seemed to disappear around the listeners, leaving only the sound and the emotions it evoked. The pianist watched, her own hands resting lightly on the keys of her instrument, unsure if she should play or simply observe. The music was so powerful, so genuine, that it demanded attention and respect, not competition or display. The janitor's eyes closed as he played, his mind and heart fully immersed in the melody. He was not performing for recognition or applause. He was performing because it was a part of who he was, because the music had been a constant companion through years of quiet labor and unseen struggle. Each note told a story, not just of skill, but of resilience, of hope, of the quiet dignity that comes from dedication and love for one's craft. The audience was captivated. They could feel the layers of experience embedded in the music, the subtle shifts in tempo and tone that spoke of a lifetime of both hardship and beauty. People held their breath, moved by the unexpected depth of feeling that emanated from the piano. Some were in tears, others simply sat in stunned silence, unable to articulate the emotions stirred within them. The pianist, once confident in her superiority, found herself humbled. She realized that talent was not always visible, and that greatness could emerge in the most unassuming forms. She had been ready to dismiss the janitor, to laugh at his audacity, but now she understood the lesson he had brought quietly into the hall. It was a lesson about respect, humility, and the enduring power of dedication. When the piece ended, there was a moment of profound silence. The final note lingered, echoing through the hall as if the building itself had absorbed the music and was holding it gently in the air. Slowly, the audience erupted into applause, some standing, some clapping with tears in their eyes. The janitor rose from the piano, his face calm, a quiet smile playing at his lips. He had not sought this reaction, but it was a natural consequence of the truth he had shared through his music. The pianist approached him once more, this time with no trace of mockery or surprise, only sincere respect. She extended her hand, a gesture of acknowledgement for the talent and heart that she had witnessed. The janitor shook her hand gently, a silent understanding passing between them. It was a connection born of music, of shared recognition, and of the unspoken bond that forms when someone reveals their true self without pretense. Outside the hall, word of the janitor's performance began to spread quickly. Musicians, critics, and audience members alike shared the story with friends and colleagues. The tale of a humble worker with extraordinary talent inspired many, reminding people that greatness often lies hidden beneath the surface. It was a story of quiet triumph, of dignity, of the power of passion and perseverance. Back inside the hall, the janitor returned to his duties, quietly moving through the aisles and polishing the floors. Yet something had changed. He no longer felt like an invisible figure, overlooked and underestimated. He had shared a part of himself that could not be ignored, a gift that transcended his position and touched the hearts of everyone present. And in doing so, he had reminded the world that true talent is not measured by status or appearance, but by the depth of dedication and the courage to share one's gifts, no matter the circumstances. As the evening continued, the pianist took the stage for her own performance. She played with skill and elegance, but in the back of her mind, she carried the memory of the janitor's playing. It was a humbling presence, a reminder that the world of music was vast and filled with hidden treasures. Each note she played was infused with a newfound respect and awareness of the countless talents that might go unnoticed every day. The janitor, meanwhile, finished his work for the night and quietly stepped out of the hall. He walked through the empty streets, carrying the music with him in his mind, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. He had not sought fame or recognition, but he had touched lives in a way that would linger far beyond the walls of the hall. The evening had been a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of talent, and to the enduring beauty of sharing one's gifts, no matter how humble the stage. That night, the janitor's story became a quiet legend among those who had witnessed it. The memory of his music, the way it had silenced the hall and captured the hearts of all who listened, would remain with them for years to come. And for the janitor himself, it was a moment of validation, a rare and precious reminder that even the most ordinary life can contain extraordinary moments when courage and passion are allowed to shine. The next day, the hall was quiet, almost reverent, as if it still carried the echoes of the janitor's music. People who had attended the performance could not stop talking about what they had heard. They shared their impressions with friends and colleagues, their voices full of wonder. How could someone who had spent years cleaning floors and polishing benches play with such emotion and skill? It was a question that lingered in everyone's mind, a reminder that talent could emerge in the most unlikely forms. Inside the hall, the janitor arrived early, as he always did. His steps were steady, his movements careful, yet there was a subtle energy in him that was new. The previous evening's performance had changed something, not only for the audience but for him as well. He approached the piano, his hands brushing over the keys as if greeting an old friend. The instrument felt familiar, alive, waiting for him to create once more. He did not seek attention, yet he knew that eyes would be on him today, filled with curiosity and expectation. The pianist entered the hall soon after, her expression thoughtful. She had spent the night replaying the janitor's performance in her mind, amazed at the depth and clarity of each note. She had never expected to witness such raw, authentic talent from someone she had dismissed so easily. She approached him quietly, offering a polite nod, and then took her seat nearby, her eyes fixed on the piano. She was ready to watch, to learn, and perhaps to be reminded of what music truly meant. The janitor took a deep breath and began to play. His fingers moved across the keys with grace and precision, each note deliberate, carrying emotion that seemed to fill every corner of the hall. The music was more complex than before, layered with subtleties that revealed years of practice, patience, and a deep understanding of melody. The audience, though smaller in number than the night before, felt the intensity of his performance. Some leaned forward, captivated by the story told through sound, while others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Each note seemed to carry a memory, a fragment of the janitor's life. There were moments of joy, delicate and fleeting, and moments of sorrow, heavy yet beautiful. The hall was silent, except for the piano, which spoke more powerfully than words ever could. The pianist watched, her hands resting lightly on her own instrument, feeling both admiration and humility. She realized that music was not simply about skill or fame. It was about expression, about conveying something that came from deep within. The janitor embodied that understanding fully, and it was impossible to ignore. As he played, the janitor's mind drifted back to his early days. He remembered the first time he had touched a piano, the way the keys had felt under his small fingers, the thrill of creating sound that could move people. He remembered lessons given and lost, opportunities missed, and the long years when music was only a private solace. Yet he had never stopped practicing, never stopped listening, never stopped dreaming. And now, in this hall, his dreams were no longer hidden. The pianist could not help but be drawn into the performance. She watched the movements of his hands, the subtle shifts in his posture, the quiet intensity that radiated from him. Each note he played seemed to challenge her assumptions, to remind her that true artistry was not always accompanied by recognition or applause. She realized that she had underestimated him, and in doing so, she had learned a valuable lesson about humility and respect. The audience, too, was captivated. They felt the music's power, its ability to convey emotion beyond words. Some had come expecting a casual performance, a curiosity perhaps, but what they experienced was something far deeper. They were witnessing a lifetime of dedication condensed into a single performance, a reminder that greatness often lies in places overlooked by the world. They whispered to each other in awe, careful not to disturb the flow of the music, their eyes wide with admiration. The janitor's playing grew more intense, more passionate. He moved seamlessly from delicate passages to powerful crescendos, each transition smooth and effortless. The music was alive, breathing, telling stories of love, loss, hope, and resilience. Every listener felt it in their own way, connecting to the performance through memories, emotions, and experiences. It was as if the hall itself had become a vessel for his music, carrying it beyond the walls and into the hearts of everyone present. The pianist finally found herself unable to remain silent. She leaned closer, her own hands hovering above her instrument, unsure whether she should join in or continue to observe. There was a moment of hesitation, a recognition that this was not a performance to be competed with, but a moment to be witnessed, honored, and learned from. She realized that music was not about ego or status, but about sharing something profound, something that touched lives in ways words could not. As the janitor continued, he began to incorporate subtle improvisations, unexpected twists that demonstrated not only technical skill but creativity and intuition. The audience was spellbound, unable to predict the direction the music would take next. It was alive, unpredictable yet perfectly controlled. The hall vibrated with energy, and even the air seemed charged with the emotion of the performance. The janitor's mind and heart were fully immersed. He was not thinking of recognition or fame. He was simply expressing himself, allowing the music to flow naturally. It was a rare purity of intention, one that transcended the usual expectations of performance. Every note was deliberate, yet free, precise yet full of feeling. It was a balance that could only come from years of devotion, from someone who had truly lived with music in their soul. The pianist watched, her admiration growing with each measure. She had spent years perfecting her own technique, yet she could see nuances in his playing that she had never encountered before. There was an honesty in his music, a transparency of emotion that made every note resonate more deeply. She realized that true mastery was not measured solely by speed, accuracy, or recognition, but by the ability to communicate and evoke feeling in others. The audience responded in subtle ways. Some shifted in their seats, leaning forward to capture every detail. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound envelop them. Some wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the unexpected beauty and depth of the performance. There was no talking, no distractions, only an intense focus on the music and the emotions it carried. It was a shared experience, a moment of connection between the performer and those who listened. The janitor reached the climax of his piece, a passage that required both technical skill and emotional depth. His fingers flew across the keys, yet never with haste, always precise, always expressive. The hall seemed to pulse with the rhythm, the music wrapping around the audience, filling every corner, touching every soul present. It was a moment of revelation, the culmination of years of practice, struggle, and dedication distilled into sound. As the final notes lingered, the hall fell into a stunned silence. No one moved for a heartbeat, unwilling to break the spell that had been cast. The air was thick with emotion, a mixture of awe, respect, and admiration. The pianist rose slowly, a soft smile on her face, her eyes reflecting the depth of what she had just witnessed. She understood now that she had been given a rare gift, the opportunity to witness greatness in an unexpected form. Finally, the audience erupted into applause. It started slowly, hesitant, as if unsure whether it was appropriate to break the spell, and then grew louder, more enthusiastic. People rose to their feet, clapping with a mix of excitement and reverence. Some shouted words of praise, others simply smiled, their hearts full of the beauty they had experienced. The janitor stood quietly, nodding in acknowledgement, a humble smile on his face. He had not sought this reaction, yet it was the natural result of sharing something genuine and heartfelt. The pianist approached him once more, extending her hand in genuine respect. "You're playing? It's incredible," she said softly. "I underestimated you. Thank you for sharing your gift." The janitor shook her hand, a quiet acknowledgement passing between them. It was more than politeness. It was a mutual recognition of talent, effort, and passion. In that moment, all pretenses fell away, leaving only the truth that music was about connection, expression, and the courage to share oneself. The hall began to empty slowly, yet the memory of the performance lingered. People talked quietly among themselves, sharing their impressions, reflecting on the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. Outside, the streets were calm, yet the story of the janitor's extraordinary talent was already beginning to spread. Those who had been present knew they had experienced something rare and special, a reminder that greatness could appear in the most unlikely of places. For the janitor, the experience was quietly transformative. He returned to his duties, not as an ordinary worker, but as someone who had shared his soul through music and touched the hearts of all who listened. The performance had reminded him of the power of dedication, of perseverance, and of the quiet strength that comes from following one's passion despite obstacles. And in doing so, he had shown the world that true talent could not be hidden forever, that it would always find a way to be heard, even in the most unexpected of circumstances. The pianist, too, carried the memory of the performance with her. She understood now that music was not a competition or a showcase of skill, but a means of connecting, of touching lives, and of conveying emotion that could not be spoken. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper appreciation for the diversity of talent and the unexpected sources of inspiration that could appear in her life. As the evening drew to a close, the hall seemed to settle into a quiet reverence. The chandeliers cast their soft light over the polished floors, the piano resting as if it, too, remembered the performance. And in the stillness, the janitor and the pianist shared a silent understanding. That music, in its purest form, was a bridge between souls, a language that transcended status, appearance, and expectation. It was a lesson that would linger, not just in the hall, but in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. The hall had emptied, leaving behind a quiet stillness that seemed to hold the echoes of the janitor's music. The chandeliers cast a soft glow on the polished floor, and the grand piano sat silently, as if resting after the intense performance it had carried. The janitor moved slowly through the hall, collecting his cleaning tools, but he did not rush. There was a calmness about him, a quiet satisfaction that came not from applause or recognition, but from having shared something deeply personal with those who had listened. Outside, people were talking in hushed tones about the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. Word spread quickly, from one friend to another, from audience members to staff and students who had not even been present. The story of the janitor who had played with such mastery and emotion began to take on a life of its own. People were amazed, not just by his skill, but by the contrast between his humble appearance and the depth of his talent. It was a story that reminded everyone that greatness could come from the most unlikely places. The pianist remained in the hall for a while, sitting quietly on the edge of the stage. She replayed the janitor's performance in her mind, trying to understand how someone could possess such skill without the formal recognition or training that she had known all her life. She realized that she had learned an important lesson about humility and perception. She had been ready to mock and dismiss him, yet he had shown her that true artistry was not about status, appearance, or competition. It was about honesty, expression, and the courage to share what one carried within. The janitor finished his cleaning, but before leaving, he approached the piano once more. He ran his hands gently over the keys, a silent farewell for the night. The piano had been his companion for years, a witness to his private struggles, joys, and dreams. Tonight, it had also been a bridge to others, allowing him to communicate in a way that words could never express. He did not need recognition, yet he felt the quiet fulfillment of having connected with people through music. Backstage, staff and students were buzzing with conversations about the janitor's performance. Many admitted that they had underestimated him, and now they could not stop talking about the depth of emotion, technical skill, and creativity he had shown. Teachers discussed how rare it was to encounter someone with such natural talent, while musicians debated the improvisations and subtle nuances that had made the performance unforgettable. Everyone seemed to agree on one thing. This was a moment that would be remembered for a long time. The pianist finally rose from her seat and approached the janitor. She had spent the evening reflecting on what she had witnessed, and she wanted to acknowledge his skill personally. "You're playing," she said softly. "It was extraordinary. I never expected anything like it." The janitor looked at her with calm eyes, not seeking praise. "Thank you," he replied quietly. "I just wanted to share what I could." The simplicity of his words, coupled with the power of the performance, left the pianist speechless for a moment. She understood that his humility was part of what made his music so genuine and affecting. It was a reminder that talent alone was not enough. Character and dedication were equally important. She felt a deep respect for the janitor, a recognition that went beyond mere acknowledgement of skill. Outside the hall, the story of the janitor began to spread even further. Local journalists caught wind of the event, and soon the tale appeared in newspapers and online articles. Social media amplified the story, sharing videos and eyewitness accounts of the performance. People were inspired, moved, and reminded that appearances could be deceiving. They were encouraged to look beyond labels, positions, and first impressions, and to appreciate the hidden talents that often went unnoticed. The janitor, unaware of the growing attention, returned home quietly. He carried with him a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that he had expressed a part of himself that was deeply meaningful. He did not seek fame or recognition. The music itself had been enough. Yet he also understood that what he had shared had impacted others in ways he could not have imagined. It was a rare and precious moment, one that would stay with him and with those who had listened for a lifetime. In the following days, the hall staff and regular visitors began to treat the janitor differently. There was a new level of respect and curiosity in the way people interacted with him. Some approached him, asking questions about his musical background, while others simply nodded with quiet admiration. The janitor remained humble, answering questions with modesty, but he could not ignore the subtle shift in the way people perceived him. He had moved from being invisible to being recognized, not for his position, but for his skill and character. The pianist herself began to reflect on her own approach to music and life. She realized that she had been too focused on recognition, performance, and competition. Watching the janitor play reminded her of the true purpose of music: to connect, to communicate, and to touch hearts. She found herself inspired to approach her own performances with renewed sincerity and a deeper understanding of what it meant to share something truly meaningful with an audience. Word continued to spread beyond the hall, reaching other musicians, teachers, and music students. Some invited the janitor to perform at small events, not as a professional musician, but as someone who could inspire others through his story and his music. Others sought to learn from him, curious about his approach, his practice, and the dedication that had kept him connected to music through the years. The janitor accepted these invitations quietly, always maintaining his humility, but he understood that his music could now reach beyond the walls of the hall where he had once been unseen. Back at the hall, the atmosphere had changed subtly. Musicians and staff who had once overlooked the janitor now paid close attention to his movements, listening to the quiet precision in the way he worked, the careful attention to detail in every task. The hall itself seemed to carry a new energy, a sense that something extraordinary had passed through it, leaving behind inspiration and possibility. The pianist and the janitor occasionally practiced together, not as rivals but as collaborators. She found that she could learn from his intuition, his sense of emotion, and the way he approached music with honesty and depth. He, in turn, appreciated her experience and guidance, discovering that sharing the piano with someone of her skill offered new perspectives and challenges. Their relationship became one of mutual respect, a partnership built on admiration, learning, and the shared love of music. The story of the janitor also began to inspire others beyond the world of music. People who had read about the event shared it with friends, family, and colleagues, emphasizing the lesson that talent and dedication often exist where least expected. It was a reminder to look beyond first impressions, to recognize the hidden potential in people, and to value effort, humility, and perseverance as much as outward success. For the janitor, life continued in its quiet rhythm, but with subtle changes. He still cleaned the hall, polished the floors, and maintained the space with care, but he did so with a sense of pride and fulfillment. The music that had always been a private part of his life had now become a shared experience, a bridge to others, and a testament to the quiet strength that comes from persistence, love for one's craft, and courage to step forward even when the world doubts you. The pianist's performances also evolved. She approached each concert with a deeper understanding of what it meant to communicate through music. She found herself inspired by the janitor's humility, passion, and sincerity, incorporating these qualities into her own playing. Audiences sensed the difference, feeling a new authenticity in her music that resonated on a profound level. In the months that followed, the janitor continued to play, sometimes for small audiences, sometimes alone in the hall. Each time, his music carried the same emotional depth and sincerity that had captured hearts the first night. People who had witnessed the original performance remembered it vividly, and newcomers were captivated by the story and the sound. It became a living legend, a reminder that talent and passion could not be hidden forever, and that recognition often comes when least expected. Through it all, the janitor remained humble, never allowing fame or admiration to change who he was. He knew that the true reward was in the music itself, in the connection it created, and in the impact it had on those who listened. The story of his performance became a lasting inspiration, a testament to the power of dedication, courage, and the quiet brilliance that can reside within ordinary lives. Time moved on, but the memory of that night in the concert hall stayed alive. The janitor continued his daily routine, quietly caring for the hall, yet there was a difference now. Every sweep of the floor, every polished railing, every adjustment of the chairs was accompanied by a quiet confidence. He had shared his music with the world, even if only in part, and that act had changed the way people saw him. No longer was he just the janitor, invisible and overlooked. He was a man with a talent that could touch hearts, and people respected him for it. The pianist also carried the memory with her. Each performance she gave was influenced by the lesson she had learned from him. She played with a deeper understanding of what it meant to connect with an audience, to play from the heart rather than just the mind. She often reflected on the humility and dedication of the janitor, realizing that recognition and fame were not the ultimate measures of skill or worth. There was a richness in life that could only be felt when one embraced sincerity, perseverance, and the courage to step forward despite fear or doubt. The hall became a place where stories of hidden talent began to flourish. Musicians, teachers, and students remembered the janitor's performance and were inspired to look for excellence in unexpected places. The event became a lesson in perception, reminding everyone that appearances were not always the truth, and that brilliance could be found in the humblest of forms. Visitors who had never seen the performance often heard about it, and it added a layer of reverence to every event held there. Occasionally, the janitor was invited to play at small gatherings, workshops, or informal concerts. He never sought these opportunities, but he accepted them with grace. Each time, he played not for fame or applause, but to share the music that had lived within him for so long. His performances were quiet yet powerful, leaving people awed by the depth of feeling and the clarity of expression. His music became a reminder that life's greatest gifts often come from unexpected sources, and that true artistry lies in authenticity rather than presentation. The pianist and the janitor maintained a quiet friendship. They would sometimes sit at the piano together, exchanging ideas and learning from one another. She respected his instinctive approach, the way he let emotion guide his hands, while he appreciated her precision and experience. They learned from each other without needing to compete, forming a bond that transcended status and experience. Their collaboration became a symbol of mutual respect and the sharing of knowledge, showing that music could unite people in ways words could not. Outside the hall, the story continued to inspire. Articles, videos, and social media posts spread the tale of the janitor, who had silenced a hall with his unexpected talent. People admired the courage it took to step forward, the humility with which he shared his gift, and the dedication that had kept him connected to his music through years of work and responsibility. It became more than a story of music. It became a story of hope, perseverance, and the enduring power of following one's passion. For those who had witnessed the performance, the memory remained vivid. They recalled the moment when the janitor's fingers danced across the keys, the hall held in suspense, the emotion and sincerity pouring out of every note. It was a reminder that life often hides treasures in places people least expect, and that respecting and valuing those around you could lead to moments of true wonder. The story encouraged people to look beyond surface impressions and to recognize the potential and dignity in everyone. The janitor himself never let the recognition change who he was. He remained humble, continuing his work in the hall with care and attentiveness. He understood that his music was a gift, not a means to elevate himself above others. Yet he also knew that sharing it had made a difference, not just for him, but for everyone who had listened. He carried a quiet pride, a deep satisfaction that came from the knowledge that he had stayed true to his passion and had touched lives in the process. Life in the hall returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere had shifted. Musicians, staff, and visitors carried with them the lesson of the janitor's performance. The hall itself seemed to hold a subtle reverence, as if the echoes of that night lingered in the walls, in the floors, in every corner. Every time someone entered, they were reminded that talent and greatness could be hidden behind modest exteriors, and that moments of unexpected brilliance could change everything. The pianist often spoke of the janitor in interviews, not to boast, but to share the lesson she had learned. She explained how his music had silenced the hall, how it had taught her about humility, and how it had reminded her of the true purpose of art. Her words inspired others to look beyond appearances, to value sincerity and passion, and to recognize the hidden potential in the people they encountered. The janitor continued to practice privately, letting the music flow through him. He experimented with new pieces, rediscovered old favorites, and occasionally shared his talent with small audiences. Each time, the response was similar: awe, admiration, and a sense of connection that went beyond words. He did not play for applause, yet he could not ignore the impact of his performances. People remembered, they shared, and the music lived on, carried forward by those who had been fortunate enough to witness it. As the years went by, the story became part of the hall's history. New musicians and visitors learned of the janitor's performance, and it served as a guiding example of the importance of perseverance, humility, and courage. It became a story told to inspire students and young musicians, reminding them that talent alone was not enough, and that dedication, heart, and the willingness to share one's gift were just as important. The janitor, older now, continued his work quietly, but the music never left him. It remained a part of who he was, a constant companion, and a bridge to others. He had found a way to balance his life, to carry on his duties while also nurturing his passion. And in doing so, he had left a lasting impression on everyone he met, showing that even ordinary lives could contain extraordinary moments when courage, dedication, and love were allowed to shine. The pianist continued to perform at major venues, but the memory of the janitor stayed with her. It influenced how she played, how she taught, and how she regarded other musicians and audiences. She understood that recognition was not the measure of worth, and that true connection through music was far more valuable than accolades or fame. Her performances became infused with the lesson she had learned, carrying the spirit of humility and authenticity she had witnessed in the janitor. In the quiet moments, long after the audience had left, the janitor would sit at the piano alone, letting the notes flow freely. Each time, he remembered the night when his music had silenced a hall, when his quiet passion had captured the hearts of many. It was a memory that brought him peace, joy, and a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew that while life was full of ordinary days, moments of extraordinary beauty could appear at any time, hidden in plain sight. The hall remained a place of learning, performance, and inspiration, but it also became a place that remembered the janitor's gift. Visitors often spoke of him with reverence, and musicians were inspired to explore their own hidden potential. The story became a beacon, reminding people that every person carries within them the possibility for greatness, and that sometimes the most profound lessons come from those who seem least likely to teach them. The janitor's life continued quietly, but his legacy grew. His story inspired not only musicians but people from all walks of life. It was a testament to the power of perseverance, the beauty of humility, and the importance of sharing one's gifts with courage and sincerity. In the end, he showed the world that talent and heart could shine brightly, even from the humblest of places, and that every life has the potential to create moments that leave a lasting impact on those who witness them.